Hello, everyone. Hope everyone has had a good week so far. My name is Connor. I am the product manager here at Cloud Storage Security. I'm also one of the contributing members at Casmer Labs, which is Cloud Storage Security or CSS's internal threat laboratory. I'm excited to host you here today for the top malware threats of March 2025. What kind of trends we're looking at, what kind of malware we've discovered and we've seen, specifically the families and the types of data that they go after. So, thank you very much for attending, and let's jump right into it here. What we're going to cover today is basically a rundown of what we've discovered over the past, 30 days or so in the month of March. Um, so we discovered same as actually February on the top two, but Mirai was the number one, and that's a botnet malware that goes after IoT devices. Um, Particularly to launch DDoS attacks to basically enlist them into a botnet and then enlist them to basically bombard a certain IP or a certain local machine with packets, as many of you may know. The second one is Prometheus, and this is actually another botnet malware. It's interesting. This has seen a lot of popularity in the last 6 months or so, but it actually exposes a recently discovered Microsoft Exchange vulnerability that actually affects a lot of Windows machines back to even Windows Vista, and it's not actually patched in a lot of cases. So that's why we're actually seeing it still retain popularity even a couple months after it was first kind of detected or rather created. And the third, and I'll talk about the general trends of this, is Luma Stealer. And this is a something that actually originated out of a malware as a service. Um, I guess you could say organization. Something that operates like a real SaaS company, um, basically building malware for a fee or for a commission. And that's also very quickly growing in popularity, along with other info stealers. So this one in particular actually goes after, I believe Trend Micro said it goes after gamers, targets crypto wallets, credentials, MFA browser extensions, and a lot of other sensitive data that's just kind of left along your local machine. So think passwords in password documents, um, things like that it can kind of take and then exfiltrate and then cause more damage for you down the line, other than the fact that there's an info stealer or a Trojan on your local machine. After we go over these, we're actually going to detonate the malware. So we have a sample of particular lemma stealer that I want to go through today. We covered Mirai and Prometheus on last month's edition of the top malware samples that we've discovered. Um, but I think we're going to have plenty of content to go through on that side. So let's get into it. We'll go back to infected file types, and this actually jumps around more than you would expect. The top three is pretty much the same. It's ELF, right? A pretty simple executable and linkable format. Um, it's going after Linux systems, servers, IoT devices, whatever. B, exe, everybody knows this, Windows executable, most popular in phishing emails or maybe a malicious download, crack software, things like that, that somebody can just detonate immediately. Compressed archive. So this is actually a obfuscation tactic that I guess malware creators will take to basically compress the file or maybe obfuscate um, its true identity in the file type other than the file extension itself, which would be I guess zip, 7-zip, um, rar, all of those major kind of compressed archives. After that is .sh, so shell script goes after Linux and Mac OS particularly, and it's used to kind of carry out a set of attacks, or rather a set of actions to go after a specific purpose. And then JS, JavaScript, wide range of applications. A lot of things use JavaScript these days, and as well as devices as well. Go on from here, and we'll talk about Prometheus. So it was actually originally discovered in 2020. This is a botnet and a malware strain that's basically designed to mine Monero. So it's very interesting because a lot of how Prometheus works and a lot of how botnet works in particular um, is that originally they were used to fight off, or rather to um, initiate DDoS attacks or direct denial of service. It's also another thing, and another thing they can do is kind of take credentials and move across networks. So think your local network. It can infect IoT devices, particularly wireless cameras. Even though it can't actually mine anything on those cameras, it can propagate across those networks and wreak some pretty serious havoc. So, as I talked about earlier, it was the Eternal Blue vulnerability, and this stretches all the way back to Windows Vista. Um, it's not really widely addressed. There's Windows updates that got on it immediately, but there's also many cases in which organizations, maybe for example, one of their employees has Windows updates disabled, or maybe a local machine on your personal computer has Windows updates disabled. It kicks on at the wrong times and kind of lags you out of a call or something like that. That's a common reason for that. Same with the regular social engineering, phishing emails, removable media like USBs, and then other sorts of kind of bundled Trojan software. And then, same as I said earlier, that network propagation aspect, moving laterally across the network from one device to another. Talk about Mirai. So, this was highly, and it is highly IoT focused. So, think everything that's connected to your local device. I mentioned wireless cameras, Ring cameras, anything that is connected to your network could actually be infected by Mirai if it has the proper parameters on that. So it scans the internet for those, yeah, cameras, DVR, smart home gadgets, things like that. And then it looks for default credentials after that. It's pretty common for a lot of people, and even some large organizations. You would be surprised to leave default credentials, admin username, admin password, or root and 1234 to kind of gain access. So it's kind of a game of scale with Mirai in particular, as they go after these devices. If you go after a million, it's highly likely that you're going to get a few hits, and then there's going to be um, a way to enlist that device into the botnet, and then it waits for its attack commands, and then they go ahead and basically route packets and bombard a certain IP or a certain device um, with those packets, slowing it down or even shutting it down in some cases. So pretty nefarious from that aspect. What I want to talk about before we kind of go into Loomis Dealer here is the general rise in info stealers. So, in the second half of 2024, and especially the first quarter of 2025, we've seen a pretty big rise in the prominence of info stealers. So, we didn't see a lot of info stealers in the top three or even the top five uh, rather recently in the past 6 or 9 months, pretty consistently. But we've noticed, and something that we preach at CSS, is that attackers are moving their focus towards the data layer. And so this kind of reflects that. They're going after uh, they're going after credentials. They're going after crypto wallets. They're going after MFA extensions. And then after that, they'll go after your locally hosted sensitive information. Their end goal is to have data that can be sold on the dark web or can be used for some other nefarious purpose, maybe even combined with another, maybe a ransomware attack. If you have credentials hosted on your local PC, that can be um, lifted off of that and then used to log into your AWS account and then go encrypt everything using SSEC. That's something that Loomis Dealer can play a part of as well. So it spreads, like many others, malicious links, malicious emails, particularly Trojans inside of crack software. And we'll talk a little bit more about this after we detonate it in just a second. But um, it's a very interesting way of malware delivery. And I mentioned that it's some rather blog posts have called this the malware for gamers, um, especially for those who pirate or download illegitimate software. This is something that can seriously hit them and seriously easily obfuscated in those. in those types of programs. So let's detonate. I'm going to take over the screen here and I'm going to share the cloud storage security console. All right, awesome. So we have a Loomis dealer. We have one of these right now. So we have all of our problem files here in a test account. And this is where we have all of our malware samples. So one of the features that we have at CSS is the ability, if you're curious or you truly don't know what a file is going to do, we have the ability to give customers the ability to run a dynamic analysis. What this means is that we'll actually send the file over to a dedicated slice of a cloud sandbox. And this cloud sandbox in particular is pretty good in the sense that it recognizes that some sandboxes, or rather some pieces of malware, have abilities to kind of get around a sandbox or realize when they're actually being detonated in the sandbox and move around that. So we found that there's 0. We found 0 instances, where we've detected a piece of malware using our traditional malware scanning engines, and then that it hasn't been detected in a sandbox. So when do you wanna do this? If you want to know more about a malicious file, you're not quite sure what it actually would do, if you're just even curious about what it actually might do if it detonates on a local machine, you can set it off to this. It's pretty cheap to do. And with that being said, I ran this just about a half hour ago. So this is brand new. I didn't want to run it here because it takes about 70 seconds, give or take, to run start to finish. So we're going to show the dynamic analysis here. Oh yeah, there we go. 70 seconds right there. There's the detonation date, just about half an hour ago. What they'll do here is they'll actually map it to the MITRE attack matrix. And this is super interesting because you can actually see the defense evasion portion of this. And so you see a software packing, right? And this is a kind of a method of, like I said earlier, compressing or encrypting an executable to basically shield it from detection from traditional antivirus or even cloud sandboxes as well, or detonation sandboxes. If we move down here, you can see why it was set as suspicious, an executable with low reputation. And if you go down again, you can actually see what IP addresses this piece of malware attempted to connect to. And so you can go in here, you can see, and you can actually cross-reference this with a database of known malicious IP addresses. You'll find all sorts of crazy places where these are hosted, which is super interesting as well if you'd like to learn more about the piece of malware. And then the most important part as we go down here is the activity tree. And this is exactly what this piece of malware, in the order that it's going to take when it's actually detonated. So you can see it creates a process, and then it goes down to the MS build executable. So this is pretty common for pieces of malware that are running on .NET. Most often, you'll see a lot of blog posts, or rather forum posts online, of people saying, "Okay, I have msbuild.exe running in my task manager every 5 to 10 minutes." In many cases, that's a telltale sign of a Trojan, and so it's basically injected itself into this msbuild.exe process, and then it's going to go ahead and kick off the the actions that it needs to go after your crypto wallets, to go after whatever you might have on your local machine, and then exfiltrate that data back to the attacker, or I guess the end user. So after we've detonated those files, I want to talk just a little bit more about info stealers, right? I mentioned it earlier. We've seen a vast increase in info stealers, and that's as in general, people outside of ransomware as a service and malware as a service and your kind of run of the mill cyber actor have moved towards going after data. And that's kind of been seen the code finger attacks, massive data breaches, pretty much all of Q1. Hip Shipper in particular was 14 million records, if I'm not mistaken, just completely lost to a misconfigured S3 bucket. So the frequency is increasing, and that's also how CSS helps. So We're done with the malware right now. How we help is that we actually do malware protection. And I showed you on the console there what we can do if we actually detect a piece of malware. But we cover all the major AWS storage services as well as Azure and GCP. So we strive to be truly multi cloud in that way. So you can cover all of your storage services and where you have your most important and particularly sensitive data across um, everything under one singular console. So S3, EBS, EFS, FSX, Azure Blob, and Google Cloud Storage. What our customers really like about it is that we have two premium CISA vetted malware scanning engines. So for organizations that have to deal with that framework and make sure that everything is approved, it's no problem for that at all. We handle the licensing for you, and you can go right ahead and make sure that you can just use it right off the bat. We have a number of, configurable scanning models, event-based, retro, and API. And what we try to do here is give customers the ability to customize their protection. So if they have a lot of files coming in at a rather sporadic pace, everything can be scanned on an event-based basis. So as it's kind of dropped into an S3 bucket, for example, we will go ahead and we'll kick off an event listener that will go ahead and notify the agent to scan that file. The retro scanning can go on schedule. So for those who have periodic scanning requirements, think PCI DSS, especially version 4, HIPAA, SOC 2, whatever those major compliance frameworks might be, most of them have a periodic malware scanning requirement to stay compliant. And then API scanning for our highly regulated customers. We want to make sure that they can actually scan that file and then return the verdict before it is actually even written to a bucket. So there's absolutely no chance that file could land there and then be downloaded and executed before that. As I showed you before, the remediation options. So dynamic analysis. We also have static analysis, which is pretty similar. It's pretty close to a hash lookup. So it will basically correlate it with a massive corpus of known malware files, or rather known malware hashes, and that's with some of our partners that we work with, particularly Sophos. We also have our malware quarantining. And this is something that a lot of our customers really like to use because it's a two-click setup. It is legitimately you select the scanning bucket and you select the detonation bucket, or rather, sorry, the quarantine bucket. And as those files are found to be clean or dirty, the dirty files are automatically set to that quarantine bucket. You can make sure that nobody can access them if they don't need to, and nobody can go and download and execute those files just as an added layer of security. Um, and then that's pretty much it. It's 2 clicks, start to finish. With that being said, really appreciate everybody tuning in today for this edition of the top malware threats of each month. We're going to do one for April. We're going to do one for May, and we're going to keep tabs on all of the malware and specifically the malware trends that are starting to kind of creep up in these past couple months, and also the next couple months. So thank you again for attending. If you have questions, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can also reach out to sales at cloudstoragesec.com if you want to talk to a subject matter expert on the subject. Or if you don't want to talk to sales, you can go straight to AWS Marketplace for a 30-day free trial. So we give you a pretty generous amount of data to go baseline your own data and make sure that there's no malware sitting latent in there. And like I said, it's 30 days. You can tool it around, make sure the solution works for you. And then we can move you on to one of our unlimited scanning plans. So 4 tiers based on um, number of employees or AWS spend, whichever is lower, you self certify, and then you're off to the races. I'm going to stand around here for a couple minutes. If anybody has any questions, I'll be monitoring the chat. Um, but if not, thank you guys very much, and I appreciate your time. Mhm. Doesn't look like there was any questions. Again, if you have any, head over to sales@cloudstorage.com or head to our website at cloudstorage.security.com. Submit a contact us form, and just tell the guys that you asked for me, and I'll make sure to answer any questions you might have. Thanks for watching, everyone. I appreciate it, and have a great rest of your week.